It's in pretty good.
A jam chuck can be a very strong and effective way of holding a piece of wood on the lathe without using an expensive scroll chuck. Hi y'all, I'm Mike Peace and I just love wood turning. There's something about that zen experience of having a tool in your hand and having those shavings fly off, and it creates something lovely. It makes a wonderful gift like this kitchen canister. I've been turning a while and I've accumulated you know a fair share of chucks, various chucks and jaws, but I know all of y'all don't necessarily not at the same place. And occasionally, whether you even have the chucks, you might have to resort to something a little more basic like using a jam chuck. But it's a great technique if you just got a lathe and a faceplate and don't have a scroll chuck. I want to give this shout out to my supporter Don Lyons, who sent me these headliner scraps that just great for sanding pads to back up your sanding when you're doing hand sanding. Thanks, Don.
So when a scroll chuck won't work, either holding it inside or an outside, and maybe we don't have access to an expensive vacuum chuck, well, you can resort to a jam chuck, which is very effective. So we get a scrap of plywood or some other type of wood, mount it on a block. In this case, I'm using a scroll chuck, but it could be on a faceplate. We transfer the measurement of what we're going to be chucking to the jam chuck, and we mark that very carefully. Then we're going to locate the tool that we think we'll hollow with. I'm using a beading and parting tool, but it's a little too wide for the groove, so I reach for a 1/4 inch parting tool, which winds up being a real good fit, and that's what I'm going to use to make that recess for the jam chuck. So we get set up, we adjust it, we start cutting away that groove. Now it's important that the face of the jam chuck be flattened so the project will actually register on it. Now we're going to make a slot in here that will snugly fit, and then we're going to do a trial test, and then I'm going to come back and I'm actually going to flatten off the outside edge for it to register on. Here we do a trial fit, and now I flatten it off. Should have done this earlier probably, but it doesn't matter. And then we go back to making that opening so it'll fit. I measure the depth of the opening and compare that to the length of the tenon to make sure that I'm getting a fit at least deep enough to hold it. And I go back. I make several trial fits. I don't include all of them in the video, but the more you practice, the better you get at it. So now we put it in, and I've got a good fit here. It's hard to press it in by your hand, so I take a handle of a gouge and just smack it a few times, but it's a lightweight tool, so I reach for something a little heavier, my Bradford pear mallet, and I tap it in, and as I turn it to make sure it registers all the way around. And then as you can see, when I turn it on, that it runs very, very true. Now we always bring up tailstock support whenever we can for as long as we can, just to be on the safe side. We'll do that while I do the bulk of the removal of the tenon. And then after I finally get most of the tenon off, except for the part that's got the little hole in it from the live center, we're going to back it off, and we'll get rid of that last little part with a very small tool, the smallest tool we have, in this case a 1/4 inch detail gouge. Then we can go to finishing, and I actually don't show it here, but I do a little texturing on the bottom. Now when I get ready to pull it off, as we saw earlier, it can be a challenge, and I resort actually to even a strap wrench unsuccessfully. Here's where I wrestle with a strap wrench. So it's not that difficult to remove under these circumstances. That jam chuck is sacrificial. I'm just going to take away some of the wood down near the base. So I get out my thin parting tool, and I come in right next to to the canister, but not actually touching it, and just start relieving some of that wood that's causing the pressure. And after I move just a little bit of it, again being mindful not to cut all the way down, all the way through it, just enough to relieve the pressure, we'll see that it will come off quite easily.
That should have released the holding power. Let's see. There we go. You can see there.
And I can do it by
Take
hand.
some of the pressure off. Okay. That's that trick.
If you want to know more about using a jam chuck, check out the link that I'll show here for an earlier video that goes into more detail on using a jam chuck. Next Friday I'm going to be releasing a full video on making this kitchen canister project. It's basically just a large box. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Y'all stay sharp, stay safe. Come on back here.